Niching down, setting a goal, and living in the moment with Melissa Shanahan, episode 252. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I have a treat for you. Why do I have a treat for you? Because the person I'm bringing on, first of all, this is long overdue. We should have done this interview a long time ago, but we're having it now. Melissa Shanahan. Melissa Shanahan and I, we connected. Honestly, it was through my trademark attorney, Joey Vitale, who I also know through my online course and coaching organization that I'm a member of. So those of you who listen to the podcast long enough know that my coach is James Wedmore. And as a matter of fact, I don't know when this is being released, but June is when he releases his, and once a year he releases his course, and I participate in that, specifically helping attorneys figure out how they can use information products to grow their firm. But Joey is also in James's group, and we connected there. And then Joey was promoting Melissa, and that's how we connected. And I had a conversation with her, and there's just so many areas where we see eye to eye when it comes to law firm growth, law firm management, and where the pitfalls are, that it was like we were talking the same language. And I can't wait for us to do that here, and be able to take her insight and her knowledge and unlock that for you to get a ton of value in this episode. So I'm really excited to bring her on. But before that, let me just give you her official bio that they wrote up for us. And I'm going to read that off. Host of the Velocity Work podcast and founder of Velocity Work, Melissa Shanahan helps clients and listeners shift how they operate in order to achieve the next level for their firm and their life. From numbers and business strategy to discipline and mental health, Melissa's approach provides sustainable success. So we're about to bring Melissa on, and I know you can't wait to hear this conversation, but you're going to have to wait a moment longer because I got to share with you some words from our sponsors. Finding amazing employees is the toughest job for any business, and especially for a law firm. You deserve to be the law firm owner you've always wanted to be, but you can't get there without a great team. Get Staffed Up helps you build your all-star team by staffing your law firm with incredible full-time offshore virtual assistants. Work with Get Staffed Up to save money and your biggest resource, time, while they find you the best English-speaking VAs in the world. Hashtag delegate your way to freedom. To learn more, go to profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. Thanks to our sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a superior virtual receptionist service for small businesses. They specialize in working with solo and small law firms. I discovered Smith AI a couple of years ago and was blown away by the range of services, which are available at a cost any attorney, even those of you in the smallest solo practice, can afford. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in English or Spanish, screen and schedule new leads, and even take payment for consults. The best part is, they don't just handle these conversations by phone. They also have live agents and chatbots capturing leads on websites and via text message. If there's one growth hack to your practice, this is it. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front lines. They'll capture new leads while you work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $210 a month for calls and $140 a month for chats. They even offer a totally free chatbot, so there's no excuse. Try Smith AI today and see for yourself why attorneys like Justy Nickel in Colorado say Smith AI receptionists are the secret to business growth and client happiness. Smith AI offers a free trial, and podcast listeners can get an extra $100 discount with promo code Profit Law 100. That's Profit Law 100. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Trust me when I say, don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. And we are back. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
It's my absolute pleasure to have you here. And might I add, Melissa was a speaker at the Law Firm Growth Summit as well. So we definitely have had her in our world and talking to our audience. So you might already know her. But for those of you who don't know who Melissa is, give us a little bit of the backstory. Who are you? Where do you come from? How do you serve? How did you come to serving lawyers? Because I get asked that all the time, right? I'm not a lawyer. I'm an accountant. How did you end up choosing lawyers as your focal point?
Yeah, I did the very similar work to what I do now with attorneys. I did at a consulting firm for dentists and doctors for years. And when I made the decision to leave that company and go out on my own, I was going to take what I learned, and I didn't have a niche. I knew I was supposed to have one. Everybody says that, but I didn't have one. And so I was focused on small business, generally speaking. So I worked with a number of different businesses, and it was hard because to do the kind of work that you and I do, you have to really understand the business. And so it was very challenging and really time consuming to work with all different kinds of businesses and dig deep and learn about them. Well, I had one attorney who was my first attorney client, and everything from my past life, so to speak, with consulting had transferred so well. And he was a pleasure to work with. It was Joey Vitale. He was my very first law client. And that was 3 years ago, I think now. And so I just made a call really quickly after that. Like, I'm just going to focus on attorneys. I knew I needed a niche down. I really enjoyed that work. I understood the business, and so I ran with it. And so now since then, I've only focused on attorneys.
And there's so many places that we can go, but talking about niching down, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
You just demonstrated how you had to do that for your business, because you had to learn the ins and outs of every single business that you were working with. And if they're not the same, even within law, I would argue that they're not the same, right?
Oh, yeah.
You have a PI firm that operates on contingency, totally different cash flow and business model than an estate planning firm who's maybe doing flat fee versus a litigation firm that's maybe doing, contested divorces, and they're doing hourly. So definitely a lot of different business models you're still covering within the niche or niche. But what I do want to point out, this is something that I harp on a lot with my coaching clients and on the podcast. And I wonder if you have chosen to harp on it as well. And that is the lawyer choosing their niche, right? Because what happens is when you first start your law firm, you're hungry, you need business. And you tell family and friends, hey, I opened my own law firm. So now each one comes to you with their legal issue. And before you know it, you have somebody wanting to do some family law with you. Somebody else wants to do estate planning. Somebody else wants to go through a bankruptcy. Somebody else has some business they're starting to form. Somebody else is starting a nonprofit. And what happens is that you say yes to all those things. And you now have a website that looks like you're an AM 100 firm because you do everything, but you're one attorney. And what happens is just like Melissa pointed out, that she had to learn every single business, which was very time consuming.
Oh my gosh.
And therefore
so painful.
And I want to ask you, so it was time consuming. So what was the result of it being time consuming? What effect did it have on you? And look at your law firm. If you're doing multiple practice areas, how much time are you spending researching, understanding that area to get up to speed so you could serve one client? So in your business, Melissa, what was the effect of that time consumption being, that you had when you had to learn each business?
Oh my gosh, it was extremely stressful. And I have a bit of a perfectionist bone in my body, as I think most people probably listen to this podcast do, but I wasn't going to walk into because at the time, the only thing I did was host strategic planning retreats, annual and then quarterly. And so businesses that were going to invest in that, I have to understand their business top to bottom. And so getting all the data that I would need. And when you don't know what you don't know, you don't even know what data you need. I know top line stuff that I need, but getting into the weeds, there's some general stuff that every business should look at, but there's some specific stuff around their business model and around their business that you need to look at. So it was just, it was really stressful. It was really time consuming. I knew pretty quickly this was not a sustainable model for myself. This is not what I was looking for, but I wasn't ready to declare something specific yet. And I almost did. So actually, weirdly, I had a few clients that were creative agencies and like branding and things like that. For some reason, I had a few of them up front, but it was I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy the work. I didn't enjoy the owners. I didn't enjoy, like, there's a certain kind of artistic creative that comes to that. And I have nothing against artistic creatives, but when, we got to get down to business and you got to be willing to look at things in a different way. And that's really hard for, I think, some creatives to be willing to do. So it's like pulling teeth. I knew that wasn't what I wanted to niche down to, even though for some reason that business was coming. And so anyway, it's almost like you test the waters just long enough to get a taste of when it's right, it, and then you have to trust your gut and make the call and just go with it. And it's the best thing I ever decided. Had I not made that decision, who knows where I'd be right now, but everything sped up. My business lifted off the ground once I just decided, like, yep, this is what I'm doing. And I cut it down to just attorney, law firm owners.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think if we start to look at why did that happen? Why did everything speed up? And you intuitively, our listeners can start to understand and see right away, well, because you didn't have to learn every time you brought in a new client, you have to learn something new. You could just execute, you could just meet with them, you could just do the work, you can create a system and a process around it. You can probably bring on some assistants to do some of that work because now you've created a process where information gathering can happen on its own. Communication with the client can happen on its own, things like that, where before everything had to be manual because it was different for every single person coming through the door. But more importantly, with doing those things, you created room and space for new clients to be able to come. And that's where I think people just don't understand, because it sounds like a woo-woo concept, right? But the reality is that subconsciously, you do things to get in your own way when you don't believe that you can handle the new business. So what happens is that you might have a lead that comes in and you don't follow up with that lead. Not because you have a poor follow-up system. I mean, that's part of it, right? But because you subconsciously know, if I say yes to this person, I'm going to have too much on my plate. So instead, I'm just going to not call them back. And then I'm going to say, oh, this lead was no good. Right. And it's not going to be my fault. Or I'll meet with somebody, but I won't do a good job of presenting my law firm as the answer for them. I'll keep saying, this is what you should do, instead of saying, this is what I will do for you, and preparing the client for their no, instead of preparing them for their yes. But we do that subconsciously, not realizing it. And that's because we don't have room. We don't have the space for them. And that space gets created by focusing on one thing. And one word that you said really caught my attention, and that was, you didn't want to declare your niche. I really like that word because I struggle with the same thing. Every business owner struggles with the same thing. And lawyers that are listening to this are like, yeah, I don't want to declare myself an estate planning attorney. I don't want to declare myself a criminal law attorney, right? I want to leave my options open. I want to still be able to say yes to other things. And what's really important to understand is that at any point in time, Melissa can decide to say yes to somebody who asks that's not a lawyer. At any point in time, if you get somebody who comes through the door, you always have the option to say yes to an opportunity.
100%.
But when you declare that this is my focus, this is my practice area, what you're doing is you're declaring, this is how I'm going to be able to focus my marketing efforts. This is how I'm going to be able to focus my systems and processes. This is how I'm going to be able to focus my hiring, because everything that falls behind it is now in line with building a firm that's an estate planning firm.
Yeah.
Because I made that declaration. When I declared that I'm working with attorneys, that's when my business took off.
Yeah. Same.
My mission statement is to empower all people with wealth creation so that this and future generations can lead a better life. Mm. How am I getting to all people? By just serving attorneys? Mm. Well, I'm at the tip of the iceberg of my journey. I have a vision that is so much larger than what I'm doing today. Mm-hmm. And I would expect that every person listening to this podcast has such a vision. Hmm. Yeah. Maybe it's just estate planning for you, but maybe it's bigger than what you're doing now. Or maybe it's 7 practice areas, but you got to start with one. So yeah. I think that just looking at our own journeys as business owners, even though we're not lawyers, is that a perfect example, because this translates from business to business. You go to a landscaper, right? You got to focus whether you're doing commercial landscaping or residential landscaping. You try to do both at the same time, you're not going to be the winner in either of those games. Yeah. It's different crowds. It's different ways of bidding that work. It's different. Like one commercial job keeps your team busy for an entire day, whereas you can knock out 20 houses in a day. You have to decide which one you're doing. Mm-hmm. So every single business this translates to, it's not just law. Yeah. Something I believe heavily in, and that I talk to clients about a lot, but not necessarily for picking their most, actually, to be totally honest, you, I imagine, have a different story, but I don't have one client that hasn't niched down already. And I do have a really great friend who's an attorney, who's a general practice in a rural area. And I mean, he loves it and he's building something great, and I'm like, go for it, man. But in terms of clients, everybody's niched down that comes to me. But here is what I'll say. I am a big believer in constraint, period. If you want to build something, if you want to go after something, you have to constrain down to one thing, just like you're saying. And so it is, I think for me, it's a universal truth. If I want to create something great, I've got to constrain down and go all in on that one thing. Now, at some point, as you're saying, I can get this to the next, get this running at a level where it's like, okay, next vertical, for example, like I'm going to pick another vertical. And so I think constraint is a big deal, because if you don't constrain down, you're just a watered down version of yourself. And that can mean your business is a watered down version of itself. Or if you're trying to work towards a specific goal, you will water yourself down along the way. It's just not a great way to live. It's stressful, it's chaotic, and you don't get anywhere nearly as fast as you want to. So constraint is important, whether you're picking a business niche or whether you are trying to decide what goal to shoot for within your law firm for the year. And the other thing that kind of goes along with that I believe heavily in, is continuously working towards simplicity, because it's actually very easy to build something complex. It's not easy to build something simple. And there's something really elegant and sustainable about simplicity. And that kind of goes hand in hand with constraint. So yeah, those two things I knew I needed to do it, and I knew I would. But it did take me a bit to figure out, like, yep, that's where I'm putting my eggs, are going in that freaking basket. Yeah. And you know what's interesting is that this is counterintuitive to why most people go out and start their own law firm, right? If you look at the word constrain, what is the one reason that you went and started your law firm? Most likely freedom. Yeah. But you most likely wanted freedom from your job, from your boss, from your lack of advancement, whatever, or just time freedom to be able to make your own decisions about what you're doing, when you're doing things like that. That is, I think, the number one motivation that people have before they then get in touch with, okay, what is my bigger purpose? What's my why? Like, who am I serving, and why do I want to serve these people? But that's why you leave your job and start a business, and then we tell you, you got to be constrained, right? And you start down. And you start to look at that and you're like, well, that doesn't feel good to me. Yeah. It doesn't feel good to not be able to do whatever I want, whenever I want. Right. But the secret to success is to have the discipline to put yourself into a box, even though that's exactly what you were taking yourself out of to build your business. And that's why I think people struggle with this. They struggle with the ability to do that because it's exactly opposite what they thought they were getting.
I think so. Sometimes I'll get that pushback where they're like, that's why I left a firm. Like I don't want this, it feels rigid, but the way I separate it in my mind, and sometimes I'll say this, is that you are associating what you were experiencing at the big firm or whoever you worked for. That was shackles. Constraint is freedom. Constraining down is the thing that gives you freedom. Could you have created freedom where you were? Maybe not. I don't know your specific scenario, but you were working for someone else. When you go out on your own, I think there's a lot of times for people, the pendulum swings the other way, where they're kind of like what you're saying. They're like, hell no, I don't want any constraints, any of that. I want to do what I want, when I want, and I'm going to build my business that way. And at some point you start to realize, well, that's not a great way to go. Like something doesn't feel good about this whole thing, even though it's supposed to feel good because it's so freeing. But the constraint is what provides the freedom. And I believe in that with how you manage your time. I believe in that for how you set up your business. And the other thing about constraint is that it allows you to, there's a framework that I teach that is not new, but it is simple and it is what you have to follow. It doesn't matter who you are. If you want to get to where you're going, you have to know exactly what you're aiming for, which means you have to constrain down and like name something specific, and you have to make a plan, and then you have to honor your plan. Is your plan going to go as you planned? Nope. That's not the point. But you have to have all three of those. And it's very difficult if you don't constrain down to be able to make a plan. If you're all over the place and there's all this freedom, it's impossible to actually make a really well thought out, deliberate plan and to be able to honor it, to make a realistic plan, I guess. I want to, here, I feel like you were getting ready to say something. While you're saying that, there's a quote by David Allen that talks about constraint that is good, really good. And I have it on my phone, so I might pull it up if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Go pull it up. I just want to say that your framework is exactly what I do with my coaching clients in the 90-day law firm turnaround.
There you go.
And it's, the people who were at the Law Firm Growth Summit know that was my entire session at the end. That you need to, I use the GPS as an example, but you need to know where you're starting from, you need to know where you're going, and you need to create a path in between, and then you need to execute on it, right? So, which is exactly what you just laid out. What I find incredible is that the plan layers on itself. In other words, if you try to start with how do I get more clients before you've identified who it is that you're serving and how you're serving them, you have absolutely no direction about how you're going to get clients. And therefore, the whole world is your oyster, and any marketing tactic is a possibility, which makes it so hard to make a decision on the right one and to stick with it, because 3 weeks into it, something else looks more exciting because this thing's not producing results yet. Right? Same thing with staffing, right? How many people have come in and said, I hired somebody once, they were awful. It was the most awful experience. It doesn't work for me. I'm not hiring another person. Yeah. Right. But that's because you didn't know what you were building, and therefore you had no idea what you were handing off to that person. Right. So all of these layers of technology implementation, systems and process creation and design, hiring and your personnel, even managing your cash flow. If you're not clear on what your pricing structure is and how you're collecting money and what that flow looks like, and when you're going to have money in the bank and when you're going to be short money in the bank, and what are you going to do to follow for that shortfall, you can't do any of that if you don't start at the beginning. And that's why I think it's literally like building blocks, right? We need to get the foundation first and then move from there. And I love that that's what you're doing with your clients as well, is to start with the plan, but before the plan, start with the goal. Right? What are you aiming for? What are you aiming for? And people I don't care how big or small you choose. There has to be something that you're aiming for. And I think that what's interesting is that in today's day and age, today's society, is everybody wants results now. We're just used to, the pandemic made it even worse, right? because leading up to it, we had Uber and Lyft, right? You wanted to go somewhere, you can get a taxi on demand, right? But now you can get groceries on demand. You can I don't have to go to Costco anymore. They'll
Right.
bring it to me, right?
Yeah.
And we expect to have everything happen to us instantly when we ask for it, that we're like, okay, I'm going to set a goal. And now I expect that tomorrow I'm going to wake up and we've achieved the goal.
Right.
But the reality is that it takes time to get to success. It takes time to get to that goal. And you have to get there incrementally. There is at some, like you'll, when the business is growing, you'll have like small incremental steps, and then it'll go whoosh, like that, right? When is that hockey stick going to happen? That happens when you've gotten to the point where you've started to delegate some of the work, where you have other people doing things, where you have systems in place, where you have a marketing system that's bringing consistent leads, where you have people executing on systems and processes you created. That's when that stuff, when that massive growth happens, that's going to be when you've put those building blocks in place. But that doesn't happen overnight. And you have to grow into that. You have to go through the motions of getting enough clients through the door to feed yourself, then getting to the point where there's enough money coming through the door that you can bring somebody on, or you have a source of cash somewhere that you could bring somebody on, but you see that there is a need for that person. You're able to justify bringing them on, then getting organized with what they're doing and how they're doing it, so that they're not sitting there twiddling their thumbs while you're doing all the work. All of that stuff, it just builds on itself. But those are the baby blocks before that exponential growth. And people just, they want results right away, that they give up along the way when they don't get it. And they just go back to the default, which is drifting along and just doing my client work and hoping for the best.
Yeah. That basically when you're talking about this, the reason people, so you're right, it does take time, but for most people, it takes more time than it needs to, because if you just truly make a plan and honor your plan, which means that stuff's got to be in your calendar. You got to have time. Like it's not just, okay, these are the results I want to create. These are the steps to getting that. Okay. That stuff has to go in your calendar, and then you show up and you honor your plan. And again, just to your point, you have to iterate. It's not going to go perfectly. It was never going to go perfectly. If you knew how to do where you want to get, you would have already be there. So it's just, you have to stick with it. And people either don't honor their plan very well, and so they're flaky. They flake out on themselves, and then they push things off for weeks, and then they finally get to them, or they quit, which is essentially failing ahead of time. They just give up, and they don't think of it as quitting because they just kind of let it slide out of you, and they start to focus on something different. That is quitting. Your relationship with quitting is something to look at. So you're right. It does take time, but I think there's so much opportunity for us to develop ourselves, to be willing to honor the plan and be willing to fail over and over and over again on your way to wherever you want to go. And that is uncomfortable. My favorite quote is, discomfort is the currency for your dreams. That is true. If you aren't willing to experience the discomfort that comes with honoring your plan, for example, it's all of it. Setting a big goal is uncomfortable. Sometimes making the plan, depending on who you are, that's not uncomfortable. That's kind of fun. But then when the rubber meets the road, that's where people will flake out on themselves, because they don't feel like doing what they said they were going to do in the moment. They feel like doing something different, and they don't. And that's uncomfortable to actually honor your plan, no matter what. People don't do it. And that's just because we're human. It doesn't mean something's wrong, but developing ourselves in a way that will create the results we want to create only happens through discomfort. And it only happens through putting one foot in front of the other and not quitting. And so I love this topic. It's awesome. It's fun. It's great.
There's a tool that I use for my clients. Every single one of my coaching clients receives this in the mail from me when they start working with me. And this tool allows you to stay committed to your plan. And it's what I'm holding up right here on the video, if you're watching this on video. But this is an action planner produced by Alon David, a friend of mine. 90xgoalplanner.com is his website. And he has two versions of it. The goal planner is bigger. It's got 5 goals, but I like the action planner. It's light, it's small, and you're able to carry it around with you. And it has every day it has 1, 2, and 3. And then below it is the rest of the things you need to do, right? And that 1, 2, and 3 is the one action I need to take today to move the needle forward towards goal number 1, goal number 2, and project number 1, project number 2, project number 3. It could be goals, but it should be all pulling to one goal, right? Now, it doesn't all have to be business, right? In my action planner, one of those is my weight. I need to take daily action to either maintain my weight or lose weight because I struggle with that. That is a personal struggle for me because I love food. And I don't, and I've got little kids and I'm running a business and I've got big kids and I've got all these things pulling at me. So I don't always exercise like I'm supposed to. Right. So I need to have that as one of my projects because me staying healthy and me staying within the form of where I produce the best work is just as important as the day-to-day, how are we going to market this thing and what are we going to sell and that kind of stuff. So you have to figure out what are the things for you in your entire picture that's going to move the needle in your business. It's not just the business stuff. But what I really love is that if you actually use the planner correctly, if you actually have a meeting with yourself at the beginning of the week and map out your week and know this is what I need to do this day, this day, this day, this day. And all you do is you start your day and do that first before you open your email, before you answer your phone. Leave your phone and do not disturb for 30 minutes. Don't open your email. And for 30 minutes, do the one thing you need to do that's going to move the needle forward in your business. Parkinson's law is what I love to use. It's something I learned in the profit first system, but Parkinson's law works with time. It's so obvious when you look at it. Parkinson's law says that your consumption of a limited resource, a finite resource, is going to expand to the entire resource available to you. And if we look at an 8-hour workday, for example, and by the way, we shouldn't be working 8 hours a day. It's a whole nother conversation, right? But if you look at an 8-hour workday and look at what you got done in that 8-hour workday, try something on. The next day, say, I need to do this exact same stuff. I only have 6 hours. I must leave at 3 o'clock. I don't know. I have a wedding. I'm getting arrested. Whatever it is, I'm done at 3 o'clock, right? So you will be able to accomplish the same amount of work in those 6 hours as you did in the 8 hours. How do I know that? Because we are so unproductive in our work that there is so much room for improvement. And if you cut out that 30 minutes to work towards your goal and then only give yourself 7.5 hours instead of 8, you will be just as productive as you were before, except that now something different is going to happen. And that's in your words, you've committed to the execution of your goal. You're honoring your plan, and you're taking those steps. And what happens is that it's like reading a book, right? You start reading a book and you're looking forward at how much you have left, right? And it's not a great feeling. You're at the beginning of the book, you're like, oh man, another page, right? But you read one page at a time. And all of a sudden you look at your book and you're like, oh my gosh, look at how much I've read and how little I have left. And that's the same thing with your goal. If we try to execute our plan in fits and starts, then all of a sudden we need to be focused on our plan for an entire week to try to make something happen. And everything else falls by the wayside, which is not sustainable. So then we go back to the old way of doing things, and we leave our thing half done. But if we take that baby step every single day, just a little activity every single day, and just consistently continue moving forward, we're turning a page in the book, all of a sudden your 400-page book is read at the end of the quarter. And that is how you move consistently in the positive direction for your business. And we could talk about this all day, because
I know
the real problem, this is the real problem that I've seen in my clients, and I'm sure it's the same with yours, is sticking to the execution, coming up with a system that works for you. Because I could show you the action planner, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to use a planner. Not everybody's going to be able to, that just doesn't work for everybody. As a matter of fact, I have one coaching client. She took a big piece of paper, like an oak tag sized piece of paper, and she mapped out her entire quarter on that oak tag. That worked for her. That would never work for me. It just wouldn't. Like, I just don't operate that way. But I never thought of showing it that way because it doesn't work for me. So I don't show it that way. But you have to You have to buy into the fact that you have to find a way to do this and then find a way to do it for you, because we're all going to lay out some sort of system, but it might not work for you. But there has to be a way that you can stick to execution regularly every single day.
Yeah, I think what was the sentence you said at the top? You said, oh, people don't stick with execution. Is that what you said? That's how you phrased it.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it is good. Like I have my own groove that works for me that I would never expect would work for most, right? It's customized and I've worked with it. But if you can get honest and realistic about planning, so your action planner, that is something that works really well for you. But I would imagine that one of the reasons you set yourself up for success there is because you aren't listing or planning your time to do too many, like an unrealistic number of things in the set hours. I love compressing, like what you talk about with Parkinson's law. I think it's fun to figure out, like, what am I capable of in this short amount of time? Like, let's go and sit down, remove distractions and get to work. And you kind of blow your own mind with how quickly you can move through things. But people aren't honest with themselves about they don't plan well enough, first of all. So they just don't. Your calendar, whether you use a planner, whether you use something else, it should be your boss. You follow your calendar, period. Because when you're planning your time, you're doing it from a really high level place where you can then decide whether you put it in a planner, whether you put it in a calendar. It doesn't matter where you put it. And maybe there's one strategy or tactic that's better than another for you. And you may you may learn that. But even if you have the wrong tactic, you follow your freaking plan. That is it. And that's the discipline piece that I think people, the ones that turn on and are willing to develop themselves in a way that starts to figure out, like, why am I not doing the things I said I was going to do? Is it because my plan was unrealistic? Or is it that I'm flaking out? It's kind of a habit, a default that I do. And you have to get curious and look at yourself, because whether you have a paper calendar, whether you use, like, your action planner sounds amazing, whether you use Monday Map, which is something I teach, whether you use Full Focus Forward or whatever, the Full Focus Planner, it doesn't matter what you use, you honor your plan. And then if you didn't really like the method, change the method, but in next week, do something digital. If you did something paper, find your groove, but don't not honor your plan. And so it's like, I think things, I'm interested in what you think. People will distract themselves and stall themselves out by finding the perfect plan or finding the perfect groove for themselves. And you can spend years, or even, let's just say, months, which is you're costing yourself a lot of money there and a lot of time and a lot of precious resources. You can spend so long trying to find the perfect solution and not really addressing the problem, which is you not showing up for what you said you were going to do. And so this topic is something I'm really passionate about, partially because I feel like I'm on the other side of it now. And I wasn't for so long. I was the person who flaked out. I put too much on my plate and I wondered why I felt like crap every Friday heading into the weekend. There has to be a point where you get really honest. And there has to be a point where you're like, no, I have an uncompromising relationship to myself. I don't flake out on myself. I do the things I say I'm going to do. And you fly towards the results you want to create. But until then, it doesn't matter what planner you're using. It doesn't matter what calendar you have. It doesn't matter. That's not the trick. The trick is you and managing your mind and mastering yourself and building that trust relationship with yourself, which takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, but building that trust relationship with yourself so that it's as good as done. It goes on your calendar. It's as good as done. That's it. That's hard. And I said I'm on the other side now. I'm not perfect. I don't think I ever will be, but it's not a struggle for me the way that it used to be. And it doesn't take up brain space the way that it used to for me. Sounds like you have a good groove too. And you and I know you well enough to know you do show up. You do the things you say you're going to do. You don't make a plan that you're not interested in following through on. And so one more thing about the health, that is smart. And everybody listening should take a page from that, because when we tend to plan only for work, but you have to realize you as the owner are the person who has to fulfill all of this. You have to take care of yourself. So the plan has to involve different angles. It can't just be crushing work. You have to take care of yourself. So whatever version of health and taking care of yourself that looks like for you, that has to be built into what you calendar. Because if you don't, you're going to be a shell of yourself by the time you get to your result, if you even make it. So good. I hope everybody listening takes a page out of that book, because that's wise.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the books that I send to when somebody signs up for the 90-day law firm turnaround coaching program, I send a package with, there's 3 books that I include plus the action planner. And one of the books that I send is Living Forward by Michael Hyatt and Daniel Harkavy. And it's a very short book, but it's full of exercises. So it actually takes a while to go through it if you do it right, because you don't want to just read it cover to cover and say, okay, I read it. But what it's all about is making a life plan that covers all of the life domains, right? So your personal relationships, with your spouse, with your children, your personal relationship with yourself, your relationship with your health, your business, your relationship with your employees, with your clients, all that stuff, right? So you have to be intentional with everything. And it's the same concept that we're talking about. That book puts it on a bigger stage, right? And one of the most enlightening, eye-opening exercises in that book, if you actually go through and do it, is to write your own eulogy. Because it really makes you think, like, what do I want to be known for? What do I want people saying about me when I die? And it's not even the big stuff, right? It's he was kind, he was honest, he cared about others, right? And those are the things that we can do every single day, day in, day out, but we get lost. We get lost along the way. And what the word that they use in the book is drift, right? We're drifting. We're just going through life and just drifting along and just taking life as it goes and taking the punches. But if you were to get on a plane and it crashes, or be driving and a bus crashed into you and your life ended like that tomorrow, would you be satisfied with what you've done with your life from the beginning to now, to just be able to be like, this is what I am known for? And if not, and this is a heavy place to come from, but the reality is that you got to get motivated from somewhere, right? There's got to be motivation. And if you're not, then you need to look at it, examine it, and say, okay, where's the broken pieces? Where are the things that I'm failing at, that I've just allowed it to happen and I'm not being intentional with it? And that's where I think you can start to, when you create this comprehensive plan, that's when you can start to realize that there's more that you need to pay attention to every day than just your business, right? And we allow our businesses to ever consume us. Like, it is the thing that is going to define us. It's the thing that's going to define our future. Like, we cannot have a happy life if we're not successful in our business. And the reality is that if your business were to blow up tomorrow and you had to go get a job, you'd be okay. Right? It's not the be all end all. So don't make it that. Right. It's just a piece of you. It's just a part of you. It's one of the pieces in the jigsaw puzzle that's going to be the portrait of your life. And if you make it too much, if you make it the center stage, then all the other things become nothing. And then what does it say about your relationships with other people? What does it say with how, what you did for yourself and your own enjoyment of the world? So, I think it's a great book for people to go and check out and read. And also to understand that, planning you need to plan everything. It's not just your business.
Yeah. One of the questions that I ask myself a lot when I'm shooting for something is, who do I need to be in order to have that result, to create that result? And that question always brings me back to the truth, because, if I want to hit a certain revenue amount in my business, or I want to work with a certain number of clients, or I want to, whatever it is that I really am shooting for, who do I need to be in order to create that? I can't be one track minded in terms of like, that's where my attention goes. So I need to be, speaking of health. So this is the first year I've taken my health seriously in a while. And that's because that future version of myself is strong, physically strong, not frail, not eating meals because I'm cranking through lunch, none of that. I take care of myself. My body is physically strong. That's one aspect of that future self of mine. And there's others, like in a loving relationship, which I contribute heavily to, is it a loving relationship or not? So you can't, to your point, it's like, we got this one wild and precious life, as Mary Oliver, I think, says. And what are you going to do with it? Do you want to be that person that at the end of the line, you're looking back and saying like, I wish I would have spent more time with those things that I loved the most in my life? Or are you going to be the person at the end of that line that says, yeah, that was a full life. That was a wild and precious life. And I lived it well. It's funny. And I love that word drift. It's so easy to have all of these realizations and these truths kind of washed away by the busyness of things. And you do drift, and you gotta have ways to set yourself up. I think coaching is really great, but even just having reminders at the top of the day that you read every day, just to push the reset button on what you want to be true for yourself. You got to find ways to keep those truths alive, because it's work to do that, but it's work worth doing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Part of my backstory, part of where I realized, because I had this rude awakening moment that, some people have a near-death experience. For me, I went through a divorce and I was the breadwinner. So it made logical sense that she would have the kids most of the time. I would have them some of the time. We shared custody, but I was very much involved in my kids' lives. But my ex-wife became an alcoholic, and I didn't know that this was happening. So my kids went through a bunch of abuse and neglect in the process. And when we finally discovered what was going on, I did what I needed to do. I got the kids under my roof and got custody of them. And also, but my whole world became around getting them the help that they needed to be able to be normal kids, to be able to survive life. Right. So literally every day I was either taking them to therapy or taking them to an Alateen meeting. And our world revolved around getting them healthy. And in going through that process, it made me realize that so much of my time that I could have been spending with them, I was spending working extra to prove myself, to accelerate to the next level, to become even better at what I was doing. When the reality is that wasn't a sacrifice I really was willing to make, but I didn't realize at the time that I was making it. And it really made me recognize that I allowed life to happen to me. I allowed the outside world and the world around me to dictate where I was prioritizing instead of making my own priorities. And that really led me on this journey of self-reflection, self-realization, and realizing, like, why am I here? What do I want to be doing? And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing today. I couldn't be happier. Thursdays, it's a Thursday, we're recording this. Thursdays are my best day of the week by far, because I'm sitting here having these amazing conversations with people and not a worry in the world.
Yeah.
And you know what? I had breakfast with my kids this morning. I took them to school. I'm flying to Houston this weekend to go see my daughter who's working down there, because she's her birthday is coming up, and I'm going to spend a few days with her down there. I'm not perfect. There's no way that I'm perfect, but I have found that none of this happens on its own. It's all because I decided it was important, because I decided I'm going to be purposeful around it. And you have to have that same level of diligence in every domain of your life, if you want it to happen. The one domain that I really allowed to go by the wayside is friends. You know, we get together with people on the weekends, but it's like the natural stuff, like, oh, my kids' friends, parents, because our kids are hanging out together. But my real friends, like growing up, or even more recently, work friends that became more, I don't prioritize my time with them. And I feel it. Like, I know it's lacking. I know it's something I need to improve on. But there's also a give and take, right? There's only so much of you to go around. So you have to figure out where your priorities are. So within all of the domains I look at, my relationship with my friends, for me, is one of the least important. Not to belittle it, but if I were to die tomorrow, it wouldn't bother me if people said, oh, he was a good friend. He was always there in our time of need, but we really never saw him otherwise. Like, I'm okay with that. Yeah. Even though I don't, that's not really where I want to be, but you have to be able to have that give and take in all these different areas to decide where you want to go. All right. I feel like we went down this path that's really serious. And I want to bring the conversation back. So first of all, you were looking up a David Allen quote. So do you have that quote?
I couldn't find it, and I was pretty engaged, and so I just gave up. But it was something about, people tell me they don't like structure, and I say to them, when you're driving down the road, do you like that line that's in the middle of the road? And they like act confused. And he's like, that line allows you to not have to think hard and drive. You can drive knowing that there's structure and there's freedom in that. And the way that he described it was so, I hadn't heard it put that way before. I thought that was really great. I
love that. Speaking of cars and driving, there's a friend of mine who's also a business coach. His name is Drew Tang. And he was on stage once, and I heard him say a line, and I love this line. I use it all the time. And he says, you can't steer a parked car. Right?
That's so
when
good.
You're talking about taking action, right? If you don't make a decision and you don't actually do something, you can't go in any direction.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. We're down to the wire. I was going to offer, along the same tone that you were just mentioning a moment ago, something I learned fairly recently, within the last year, was that, I was shooting for this next goal, and my coach said, why are you in such a hurry? I was like, I don't feel like I'm in a hurry, but like, something I was saying was giving off. And she was like, you need to stop. You need to take a breath, because somewhere deep down, even though it's not intellectually, somewhere deep down, you are buying into something that it's better there than here. And it isn't. And she has made millions and millions of dollars. And so she was like, and I didn't think that. I would have never have said, yeah, it's better there than here, so I need to hurry and get there. But my actions and my impatience for getting there was very telling. And she asked me these questions on that call. She said, do you remember when you wanted a loving partner? And I said, yes. And she said, okay, you have one. Do you remember when you wanted a baby? And I said, yes. And she said, okay, you have one. Do you remember when you wanted to work for yourself, making what you make? And I said, yes. And she said, okay, well, you have that. You are winning and you're missing it because you're on to the next thing. And I never would have identified that way. But when tears come to your eyes, when someone says something to you, you know that you got to pay attention, there. Right? Yeah. And so I was like, wow, even, there's just, it's like layers to the onion. You keep peeling back and you keep realizing that, like, yeah, I do want to shoot for that next thing, but it's not better there than here. And I don't need to be in a hurry. And so I'm offering that up because every time I tell that story, someone needs to hear it. So I'm hoping that it goes along with what you're saying, enjoy your life, appreciate what you have, and build. It's all possible. And you don't need to be in a hurry to get there.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. This is just an incredible way to close this out. I'm on my phone looking at my podcast because I recently did an episode specifically on this topic, which basically don't miss the here and now.
Yeah.
for the future. And I will find it here.
That you're not.
There's two of them that I did, right? One is Happiness is the Drug of Success, episode 195. And the second is Living Your Legacy Today Instead of Someday, episode 197. Both of them along the lines of what you just shared. But basically, it's like we spent, and I'm guilty as charged, right? I spent the first 4 years of my business, I spent trying to shortcut my way to success.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I stopped and I said, okay, what does everyone else have to do to get to be successful? Maybe I should try doing that instead of trying to take shortcuts. Right. And I feel like that's where a lot of people are getting hung up, is they're like, somebody else started their law firm and in 1 year they were at $350,000 of revenue. I'm trying to get there as fast as I can. And instead of taking 2 years or 3 years to get there, I spent the last 5 years trying to get there in one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's where we need. So what you were saying is even more important, is like, okay, don't miss out on your accomplishments.
Yeah.
Don't miss out on your successes, celebrate them and be present for them, because that's exactly what you wanted.
And the crappy stuff, like, don't wish it away. Now I have every time I leave my house now I go for a lot of walks. And I always say when I leave the house now, this, I wouldn't trade it. If it's a crappy day where I'm dealing with, employees that I'm having a tough time there, or, anything that's tough that comes up, I just make sure that every day when I go for my walk, I'm like, this, I'm not going to trade it. There's things to learn. I couldn't be here now had I not put the work in. So yeah, I'm experiencing an issue, but it's a good problem to have. I would have wished for this problem 4 years ago. And I've created something that cannot. So it's like this, I'm not going to trade any moment. It's not better there than here. And I have to remember that there's always going to be those bad days, no matter how much success you create for yourself.
I love it. Melissa, we're out of time.
Yes.
We can continue this conversation for hours. I mean, there's no end to this discussion. So we're going to make it here. What I want is you just really shared. Normally I have our guests share like one parting piece of wisdom with everybody, but I think you just did that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump straight to, how can people get in touch with you? How can they follow up with you if they really resonated with what you were sharing, your message, your style, and they want to figure out, okay, how do I take the next step with working with Melissa? Where do they go?
velocitywork.com is my website, and there's free resources there. But my main focus is client work with Mastery Group and private client work. You can learn more about Mastery Group at velocitywork.com/join.
Awesome. Folks, just check it out. We'll leave the URL that Melissa just shared in the show notes, so you don't have to remember it. If you're out running, if you're in the shower, if you're driving, whatever it is, wherever you're listening to a podcast, do not worry. It's right in the description of the episode. Just go down. You can click the link at your leisure whenever you want. But just make sure to go back and do that if Melissa is the person for you, right? There's not everybody's the right person for you. And there's people who are listening to this, that Melissa is the person for you. So go check her out. And Melissa, thank you so much for your time and your generosity and just sharing freely from your experiences and your knowledge. And this has just been an incredible, fun conversation to have. And I really appreciate you being here for that.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have a deep conversation with Moshe.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Folks, if this is the first time you're listening to this podcast and you absolutely love the show, make sure to hit the subscribe button so that you get notified every time we release a new episode. We do that twice a week at a minimum, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesday, it's just me. Thursdays, it's an amazing guest. And it's all about them because they bring the heat and really bring the value. So subscribe to the show. And if you've been listening to this for a while and you haven't yet rated or reviewed our podcast, so we need some stars from you. I don't care how many, we need some stars from you and a description in there of why you love the show, why you're listening. Some of you come in and you're binging 200 episodes. I mean, share that with somebody, because somebody who's doing a drive-by and saying, oh, what's this Profit with Law podcast? They read your testimonial and they're like, oh, I have to check it out. So we need you to just hit that write a review button in your podcast player, go in, rate and review the show. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, go be successful. Take the nuggets from today and figure out where are the missing pieces in your puzzle and start to put those into fruition. You don't need to, I would hope if you go get a coach, but you don't need it. I do believe you need it. But if all you want to do is listen to a podcast to be successful, listen to this episode 3 or 4 times, take some notes, and just execute on those things. Put those things into fruition, and you will be successful. There's one thing I forgot when we were talking about the whole thing that I just want to share, and that is, if doing something like this action planner or what Melissa laid out sounds like too much, then define 5 action steps towards a goal. It doesn't have to be anywhere close to achieving it. 5 baby action steps. And for 1 week, put out 1 action step every day on your calendar and actually just make sure for 5 days you do it. It's like dieting for a week, right? Anybody could diet for a week. We'll all fall off the wagon at some point, but we could do it for a week. Do it for 1 week, because what I want you to do is I want you to experience what happens when you've actually done those things consistently, one after another, for 5 days, because it's like a drug, and you can then do the next 5 days. And before you know it, you'll be buying into this idea that if you actually plan ahead and decide to do these actions beforehand and then stick to doing them, you will actually move the needle in your business and be successful massively, quickly, which is what we all want. So again, Melissa, thank you. Folks, tune into our next episode. We'll see you on Tuesday. Have a wonderful day, wonderful weekend. Take care. Have you been enjoying the show? We sure hope so. To make sure you never miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player app. Next week, we will be back with more valuable resources and ideas on how to break the mold and take your law firm to the next level.